For those of you who don't know, just before a tornado is formed above your head, every animal in sight will be freaking the hell out. They know. They can feel it. You can feel it too. You just won't know what that new feeling is until the 60-year-old trees beside you are being ripped up from the ground. Being in the eye of the tornado is even more strange, as all those animals in sight are frozen. Sure, they still exist, but their little soul is on hold, and they don't do much more than just look around quietly. It's really creepy. Anyway, this wasn't a tornado at 3 a.m. The fire we made was just embers, and a roaring thunder of animals freaking out. I peeked my head out of my hammock, imagining getting my face smashed in by the first softball-sized hailstone. But no, there was no bad weather. There was no storm or looming catastrophe. It was a beautiful night, aside from the roaring animal kingdom outside. My brother peeks his head out of the hammock above me and looks down to see if I'm awake. When he saw my eyes as wide as saucers, he whispered, "What the hell is happening?" I replied, "I don't know, but I wish I were up there on your hammock." Being on the ground level usually is best for guys my size. I lack the grace to climb up hammock ropes and jump into a bed 8 feet off the ground. Anyway, the terrifying, creepy roaring continued for about 30 seconds. And then, it just suddenly stopped. It seemed to be a sweeping effect, where the outside of the radius stopped first and the creatures closer to us stopped last. But it was only a single second or two difference, and it was pretty damn synchronized. My brother and I freaked out, and after around 5 minutes of silence, we got out of the hammock and started the fire up again. This time, we made sure it was big enough to light a few 100 feet out. The last thing we needed is a Bigfoot or some weird shit going down. My brother went up to the ridge to check on my sister and Caleb, about 60 feet uphill from our hammocks. Caleb always wanted to be in the highest possible safe spot he could, and he wanted to watch the sunrise from his hammock. As soon as my brother got to their hammocks, he yelled a shrieking kind of yell for me, the kind I had only heard from him twice, when his friend got his handlebar lodged in his stomach about an inch deep as a kid, and when he split his own head open. I ran up the ridge with my axe in my right hand and the first aid bag in my left, with my flashlight in my teeth, expecting the worst. I arrived to Caleb's bottom bunk. He was in a state of shock, his eyes wide open. He was shivering and shaking, and he was staring down at the valley. Would you know, my sister didn't even wake up? Go figure. She had her headphones in all night listening to her folk music. Apparently, she hates the sound of animals and prefers to have a controlled mental state where nothing could make her paranoid. We woke her up, and she had no idea what was going on. She just stayed in her hammock like, well, what do you want me to do? We eventually got Caleb down to the fire and wrapped him in some blankets. I gave him a shot of whiskey to sip on, but he mostly just held it and stared at the fire. The whole night was too weird for sleep, but Caleb finally laid down next to the fire and slept around 4:45. But then my brother spotted something strange. "What's that?" he said, pointing down at the valley. "Right there on the bank of the river." My sister and I struggled to get his perspective, but then finally noticed a clearing. We decided to go check it out, but one of us had to stay with Caleb. My sister wanted to because she hates creepy things and didn't want us to go down. But we insisted. I left her my axe and emergency GPS signal thing, and I told her to just scream if she needed us, and not to hesitate to use her pencil. She said to stop freaking her out, and just go, and that they'll be there when we get back. So my brother and I hiked down the river. It took us nearly 20 minutes, but when we arrived, we felt very uncomfortable. There were no animals around. None whatsoever. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. The clearing on the riverbank was about 100 yards upstream. We took the higher side of the bank to keep our distance. I didn't think either of us would actually expect anything to go down, but we wanted to remain cautious. We were around 50 yards away, at a slight elevation to the clearing. We pulled out our phones to take a picture, but our phones were dead. Mine is known to die, but I have an external battery pack that attaches to my Otterbox that I know is fully charged. My brother's phone is always reliable and usually attached to his portable solar panel charger that he keeps on the outside of his bag. His ship was dead too. Both of us tried to hold down our power buttons, not believing that they were really dead. But when we realized that they were definitely not going to turn on, we both got that paranoid look on our faces. We decided to leave, but not before carefully studying the clearing for a few seconds. It was about 100 feet across, and the shape of a triangle. All the bushes and plants that grew alongside the river were all flattened down, and even some mature azalea bushes that typically stand between 6 and 8 feet tall were eerily laying flat. It's as if everything in that triangle shape had bent down, as close to the ground as it could get. Nothing appeared broken, but appeared as if it had grown along the earth instead of growing up towards the sun. It was weird as shit, and only in the triangle area. When we got back to camp, Caleb was awake. My sister had a weird look on her face, and Caleb was totally normal. "Hey bro, you alright?" my brother asked. Caleb just casually answered, "Yeah man, doing well. Missed the sunrise, but I guess I need the sleep." We just looked at him concerned, like, what the hell? He was eating a breakfast bar and heating up coffee over the fire. We sat down across from him, and I asked him, "So, hey, do you remember that shit last night?" He looked at me puzzled. My brother added, "You know, when all the animals freaked out when we found you?" He just looked so confused. But my sister said, "Caleb, stop playing." "What are you talking about?" he said. My brother chimed in, "Bro, you were messed up all night." Caleb laughed and responded, "Yeah, I figured it had to be me, because I never sleep next to the fire all wrapped up in blankets. Not after getting that bug in my ear that one time, lol." We continued to ask him questions, but he had no memory whatsoever. As far as he was concerned, he had a few too many drinks and slept next to the fire. We told him our story, and each of us agreed that he had no recollection. We told him about the spot next to the river, and how our phones wouldn't turn on. We pulled our phones out to show him, and they were already on. My brother had around 67%, and mine had around 41. We got the creeps real quick. We decided to pack up camp and get away from that spot. But before we did a final sweep, Caleb asked, "Have you guys seen my camera?" He had a nice Sony DSLR with a nice lens, and that shit was gone. The weirdest part is that he slept with it in his hammock every single time he goes camping, and we've never seen it not on his body. He even specifically remembers taking it to bed, tucking it into its bag, and putting the lens in its sleeve. It's like a ritual for him, and he takes super good care of his belongings. We searched around the ridge, and all around the fire and in between the two spots. There was nothing to be found. Caleb even went down to the ridge a bit, towards the river, in case it had fallen out and rolled down the hill. But it was gone. We had to leave. And my siblings and I agreed to pitch him to get him a new one if he would just get out of there. About 3 miles and 1 hour later, my brother turned to me on the trail and said, "Do you think he tried to take a picture of some shit he wasn't supposed to see?" And the creepiest feeling swept over me, and I replied, "Bro, let's just forget about how messed up he was and get the hell away from there." He nodded in agreement. It's been about a year now, and we haven't seen or heard from Caleb in over 8 months. No one has.
I'm an archaeologist, and a few years back, we were doing a massive survey in the middle of nowhere in the interior of BC. All of the crew had gone home, and it was just my boss and myself left for a few days to follow up and confirm some coordinates and finish some mapping. We head out from the motel about an hour or so into the bush. We're in the middle of nowhere along deactivated logging roads. The closest town is literally miles away. We hike out to this one area that we had found some stuff in a few weeks previously. Now, for some reason, the whole area just felt wrong. I don't know how to describe it really. So anyway, we get down to business, and about 15 minutes after being hunched over mapping, there's this weird, defining whomp sound. I could actually feel the pressure in my ears. I immediately looked at my boss about 20 feet away, who was white as a ghost staring back at me. We're both standing now, staring at each other, and the same thing happens again. Ear pressure and chest pressure felt like it was just squeezed out. There's chills all over my body, and every single hair is standing up on end. My boss just looks at me and says, "Let's go." We grab all of our stuff and speed hike back to the truck. We never discussed it again. I have no clue to this day what it was, but I've been so freaked out that I still haven't forgotten it 10 years later. I still get chills thinking about it now.
About 10 years ago, I was working as a private investigator. It sounds cool, but it actually isn't. You spend about 3 to 5 hours each day driving to your cases, stake them out in a blazing hot car with the engine off for 8 hours, and then spend 1 to 3 hours in a hotel room writing up your reports before finally getting some sleep and doing it all over again. I did this job for about a year after completing my training to be a medic in the Army Reserves. I was young at the time, so the idea of making 50k a year and travelling all over the country whilst living out of a suitcase seemed appealing to 19-year-old me. As I said before, you spend a lot of time driving around in areas you're not necessarily familiar with. On one of those late nights, I found myself driving onto a twisting mountain road just outside of Taos, New Mexico. The area was heavily wooded with narrow roads that curved sharply, without a lot of places to turn off, since you were driving up and around mountains and forests. In the middle of the night, as I maneuvered my rental vehicle through a curve, I saw a woman stumbling along the side of the road carrying a small child. The sight caught me off guard and sent a shiver down my spine. It was so unexpected and so out of place. There were no houses nor buildings around me, and it was around 2 a.m. and pitch black. This unnerved me, but what sent the shiver down my spine was the way she moved. She lurched along with what I can only describe as a shuffle, straight out of a George Romero zombie flick, and she didn't look up or acknowledge me as I drove by. She just stared aimlessly at the road in front of her. You have to remember that I was 19 years old and fresh out of a year of extensive army training. I was in peak physical shape, and I thought I was Billy Badass at the time. I had spent a month working in trauma centers as part of my training, so I still don't often get freaked out or scared, but seeing this did scare me. I drove on for a minute or two thinking about what I'd just seen. Who was she? What was she doing here this time of night? How did she get here? The more rational part of my brain took over, and I came to a horrifying realization. I had been driving for about 1.5 miles past her, and I hadn't seen any homes nor businesses, nor had I come across any places to turn off since I had seen her. And it had been about 10 miles since I had come across a place to turn before I saw her. This wasn't normal. Something was wrong. I realized that she had to be hurt or in trouble. Perhaps she'd been in a car accident and wasn't shot. What if the child she was carrying was hurt? I was a medic. I had trained for a year to help people. Sure, I was scared and unnerved. But how would I feel if they later died of exposure on the mountain, and I was too much of a coward to go back and help? Wouldn't I also be scared the first time I saw combat, when my friends were depending on me? I had to man up and turn around. And as soon as it was safe, I did so. I drove back to where I'd seen her, half relieved and half horrified when I could not find her. I traced the road up half a dozen times. Where could she have gone? There was only a small area on the side of the road with guardrails for miles. I drove, turned around and drove, and turned around and drove, and turned around and drove again. I was obsessed with finding her. Part of it was out of concern for her child. Part of it was proving myself that I was doing the right thing, even though I was scared shitless. After a while, however, it became about me proving it to myself that I wasn't actually going insane. I spent hours looking for her. Eventually I stopped my car and started walking along the road, looking for any signs of her or any disturbance on the mountain to indicate that a vehicle had crashed off the road and down a mountain. I walked that entire 3-mile stretch of road in pitch black with a flashlight, at times yelling like a madman, listening to every twig and echo with bated breath. I didn't even care about my deadline or my next case. I was sure of what I saw. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't seeing things. And I wasn't overly tired. I saw her stumbling down that road, and there's no doubt in my mind. But there was nothing. Even when the sun came up and I drove to the stretch of road again half a dozen times, there was nothing. And there was no way for me to explain it, even after countless sleepless nights in the 10 years since devoted to it. I don't believe in ghosts. I saw this bullshit documentary and laugh away their evidence and stupid orbs like the rest of you do. But I also don't know where the hell the stumbling woman and her child came from, or where they went. So, on the off chance that you were stumbling down a windy road in Taos, New Mexico about 10 years ago with a toddler in your arms, please, tell me what happened, where you came from, where you went, and that you are both okay. I've been puzzled for a decade now. I was hiking through the remnants of a remote abandoned town and the surrounding area. To get as far into the woods than I was, you had to cross a fallen tree over a creek 3 separate times. I had just crossed the 3rd bridge and was about 5 miles in, and something blue caught my eye just ahead of me. There was a man in his late 60s wearing blue satin pajamas sitting in a tree. The closer I got to him, the louder he laughed. It wasn't a maniacal laugh, but it set off alarms in my head nonetheless. He also wasn't wearing any shoes and looked very well groomed/cleaned. I gave him a friendly nod as I passed and he just kept laughing. Then it stopped. I turned, and he was gone. No branches cracked, no plants rustled, no sounds were made. He was just gone. Still rubs me the wrong way. The area I was in was pretty rough, very secluded for hiking. Not very many people venture as deep as I did that day, and I still have no idea what was going on there. I'm going to tell you this story my uncle told me when I was 12. I slept with the lights on for months after. This was in the mid-70s. My uncle and his friend were 13 and playing in a quarry on the outskirts of town. There were mine trucks running up the large hills, that then dumped their load down onto the other side of this standard quarrying stuff, I assume. So they're climbing up and over all the large hills. I noticed something in a tree at the edge of the woods. They walk closer and realize it's a young boy hanging by his neck. His arms and legs were tied together behind his back, with his left leg free. He was naked and had cuts all over his genitals. There were fresh tire tracks underneath the boy's feet. He said that they heard tires spinning not long before, but they didn't think anything of it. So obviously, he can't know the whole story, but it's his guess that two guys raped and tortured this boy, tied him up in the back of a pickup, and tied the noose around his neck, then drove off. Chilling to think about. We were discussing this at my grandmother's funeral, and he said that he always regretted not going up to the boy to see if he was still alive. Understandably, he and his friends noped out of there immediately and called the police. This story takes place in August of 2013, in the mountains of South Oregon. I am a USAF Security Forces M, in other words, a military policeman. My girlfriend was at work, and as a swelteringly hot day began to turn into thunderstorms, my buddy Nick and I decided to go exploring some back roads and get out of the heat in town. South Oregon is crisscrossed with logging roads, some actively used, and many totally forgotten and grown over. Nick and I spent many of our days searching on roads that we knew, finding roads that we did not, and driving for hours into the mountains, eventually navigating back to paved roads. On this particular day, with storm clouds building over the mountains, we set off on a road that we'd never been on before and began the drive into the mountains. After driving for about an hour, we hadn't seen nor heard any signs of any other people in the woods. We rounded a bend into the thick fir woods and emerged into a meadow that was totally surrounded by thick aspen groves. The meadow was perfectly flat and eerily still. We both noticed the strange stillness almost immediately. No birds, hardly any insect noises, no squirrels, and certainly no other people. On the far side of the meadow, right at the edge of the tree line, there was a picnic table. The table was very odd, however. It was painted a bright orange and was much larger than a typical picnic table. Remarking on this, Nick drove through the meadow to get a closer look. I remember being apprehensive as we approached. The whole scenario was exceptionally strange. The overall silence of the aspen grove was unsettling. Also, it was nearly impossible to see far through the trees as aspens grow extremely close together. When we parked by the table, I hopped out the passenger seat of the truck to check it out. I'm not very tall, only about 5'5", But regardless, the table was ridiculously oversized and practically unusable. The seats were nearly at chest level, meaning I would have to climb up to even sit on. As I was looking at the table, Nick called me over to the truck, and I noticed that he was looking back into the aspens. At first, I couldn't see what he was looking at, but then I noticed a splash of colour that was completely out of place in the thick trees. A small, one-man tent was set back in the trees, about 50 feet away from this strange table. I had an initial feeling of dread hit me. I felt certain that there was someone in that tent, and if we could see the tent, they could undoubtedly see us. There were no campgrounds in the area, no people, no main roads. Surely, someone camping so remote would be, well, at the very least, a strange person. However, as we observed the tent, we didn't see any movement, nor hear any strange sounds coming from it. Nick suggested that I call out. I didn't want to, but I did. Hey, anyone in there? There was no reply. Feeling completely on edge, Nick and I thought about driving away and leaving this strange area. But we began to fear the worst. What if there was a body in that tent? What if somebody had gotten kidnapped? Foolish, I know, but we thought it just the same. After some debate, we decided to have Nick turn the truck around and drive away from the campsite, should there be any need to leave in a hurry. He would be waiting for me, my heart pounding. I started walking through the trees towards the tent. I was totally keyed up, with my senses on full alert. When I reached the campsite, several things struck me as odd. Backpacks were scattered all over. No fire had been built, and no wood collected. The tent, oh the tent, it was literally full of backpacks and women's clothing. Full of dread, I turned to leave to tell Nick what I had seen. As soon as I left, I heard Nick begin to yell, "Let's go, let's get out of here!" Not knowing what he was yelling about, I ran back to the truck. When I broke out of the trees, I saw a beat-up old Ford Taurus on the road, blocking us from leaving the meadow. I immediately leapt into the passenger seat. Nick floored the gas pedal. The car was occupied by two men, and the third person was laying against the window of the back seat. As we drove across the meadow, the driver attempted to block us from the road, but Nick drove around and accelerated the way that we'd come from. I looked back and saw the car attempting to turn around on the narrow road. Nick drove like a madman, and though I was honestly terrified that they would catch up, we hit the highway without seeing the car again. I still don't know if the person in the back was male or female. I called the state police, and they promised to send a trooper out to check the scene. I received a call the next day from the trooper, stating that the campsite and the backpacks and all the women's clothing was gone. Though he could tell that people had been in the area, the strange table is still by the thick aspen grove, and I have not returned to the area, and do not have any intention of doing so again.
So as a kid around 11 or 12, I had the world on my fucking plate. We had these woods around us that I never ever came close to finding the edge of. I would wake up in the morning early when school was out, and my friend Alex and I would spend the whole day out mucking around those woods. We would pack sandwiches and sodas and just go nuts. Play army and war, cowboys and Indians, you name it. This being the 80s, and Alex and I being smart as kids, my parents Curious had no problem with this, and enjoyed taking us to the Army surplus store to buy stuff like MREs and survival knives, camping gear. It was pretty regular that we would be allowed to stay out overnight, if my dad was there to help us set up camp close to the property. So not on an overnight, but out and about one day, we found a tree house in a part of the woods we had never been to before. Probably about a 2-hour trek from the edge of the neighborhood, maybe 2 miles or 3. It was hilly and rocky. Seriously a kid's dream. This treehouse was probably 30 feet off the ground, but it looked solid. We were so stoked to find our new castle. We hightailed it back home to get some rope, and my pop takes us down to the surplus store. And over dinner, Alex and I can't shut up about it. Next day comes, and we hike out at almost dawn. We got a backpack full of rope and sandwiches, and our knives on our hips. Excitement that's so thick we could chew on it. We make it out there and start attaching rungs made from big sticks onto one end of the rope. It took us a few good hours, but we got one side finished, and the rope crossed over the branch. That's where the little deck and door are. We finally climbed up, and are sitting on the deck looking out, and rock, paper, scissors for who gets to go in first. Alex wins and goes in, and comes right out. He's white as a sheet, and wants to go home. So curious as I am, I go inside. This treehouse is probably 8 foot by 8 foot, and about 7-8 feet high inside. The inside walls are covered, every single inch of naked girls. Not awesome found Playboy porn, but kitty porn. I think the oldest kids were about my age, but it was Polaroids and glossy magazine pages, stuck perfectly up with staples, and filling the walls up. Exit Alex and I getting back home as quick as we could. We informed my pops about it, and he calls the cops. The officer shows up and asks us a few questions like where it is, how did we get up there, where did we buy the rope, did we take any pictures off the wall? He got increasingly rude about it, and my pops put an end to it. He left with our statement and said he would be in touch. We were no longer allowed to take overnights in the woods, or be out there for more than an hour without checking in. We actually built a really long tin can phone with the permission of my parents, which allowed us a bit more of our freedom, but we were pretty cut off from the deep exploring. About a year or 2 later, that same cop stopped me when I was hanging out in a different park, saw me smoking, and caught me with a joint. Alex asked him whatever happened with the treehouse. The cop told us to not do drugs and left us alone. In college, many moons later, Alex sent me an email saying how he read in the big state paper, towns that are, say, the county seat have their own papers, but the capital city has the big paper, that the officer shot himself with his service revolver after his wife found out he was circulating kitty porn. So it comes to my mind like it came to Alex's, that we had found his little CP stash cave. The creepy part came a few months later, when Alex sent me another email saying that he went to the estate auction, and one of the items for sale was rope wrapped with a bag. Creepiest story I found in the woods I have, folks. Still grosses me out and sends chills.
I knew a guy that spent virtually his entire adult life homeless. He used to wander around all over the country and spent more than his fair share of nights sleeping in the woods with another homeless man who he befriended whilst out on the streets. One morning, he set off into the town early to fetch booze and cigarettes, whilst things were still quiet and not many people were around. His buddies stayed behind in their particular spot of the forest, sleeping. These 2 guys weren't keen on being disturbed, so they typically went fairly deep into the woods, a good 2 or so hours walk from the town. It took him a good 4 hours to get to town, buy his stuff from the offing, and then lug it back to the spot where his friend was. When he finally returned, he found his friend burnt alive inside his charred sleeping bag. In the 4-hour window that he'd been left to get booze, his friend had been attacked while sleeping in his sleeping bag and was set aflame by someone in the middle of the woods. On a 2-week solo backpacking trip, I had 4 days in seclusion between ranger station and check-in. On the first day of the seclusion, I felt like I was being stalked. I lay in my tent that night, and I could hear what sounded like footsteps around my camp, but nothing came close. In the morning, I checked all around and found no evidence of footprints or having any wildlife around me. I broke down camp and took off trying to put it behind me. The second night was the same thing. I grew so paranoid that when I couldn't hike during the day, I would go over rocks and walk through streams. Anything to try and break the trail so that I couldn't be tracked. I'd go around a blind turn and then sit there for an hour, waiting to see if anything would come up behind me. At night I couldn't sleep for more than 10 or 15 minutes before waking up. Finally I got to the ranger station check-in and told them what I had been experiencing. I went and set up camp as close to the station as I could, and later the rangers offered me to sleep on their couch for comfort, as I could actually sleep. I accepted and stayed the night indoors. I walked out to my camp in the morning, and it had been destroyed. My tent was cut on the sides, sleeping bag ripped apart and turned inside out. The rangers came to report it, took pictures of everything, and I ended up getting one of the rangers to give me a ride back to base camp, so that I could go home the next day. Not sure what was stalking me, but it scares me shitless to this day.